Welcome to the first episode of Series 1 of the History of Pro Wrestling. I am your host, Darren Dyer. Series 1, as mentioned previously, will be covering rivalries. Today, I'll be talking to you about the rivalry, the first real rivalry in professional wrestling, Frank Gotch versus Georg Hackenschmidt. August 1st, 1877, in Dorpat, Estonia, was born Georg Karl Julius Hackenschmidt. He defeated names in the early part of his career such as Paul Ponce, Mr. von Schmeling, Tom Cannon, and Tom Connors. On May 4th, 1905, Hack defeated American heavyweight champion Tom Jenkins at Madison Square Garden. As the undefeated Hackenschmidt was already the European Greco-Roman heavyweight champion, he was now recognised as the first ever legitimate world heavyweight champion. Frank Alvin Gotch was born on April 27, 1877 in Humboldt, Iowa. He was trained by the legendary Martin Farmer Burns and he debuted in June 1899. He defeated Tom Jenkins for the American Heavyweight Championship on January 27, 1904, which was the first of three reigns for the American Heavyweight Championship for Frank Gotch. He challenged Georg Hackenschmidt to a World Heavyweight Championship match on April 3, 1908 in Chicago. So with the match set, this is the tale of the tape. Both men are aged 30. Hackenschmidt weighing 208 pounds to Gotch's 196 pounds. Gotch does have the height advantage, 5'11" to Hackenschmidt's 5'9". Hackenschmidt was used to disposing of his opponents within 10-15 minutes, using his power and strength to apply his feared bear hug, either wrestling his opponents into submission or into a pinning predicament so he would pick up the win. And up until this point, he'd wrestled some 1,000 matches and never lost one of them. Whereas Gotch, on the other hand, was wrestling approximately his 100th match, having lost 6 up until this moment in time. But Gotch was the smarter wrestler because Gotch wouldn't allow Hackenschmidt to wrestle his kind of match. Instead, Gotch made Hackenschmidt wrestle the way Gotch wanted him to wrestle. Similar to Ali versus Foreman, the Rumble in the Jungle, where everybody said that Foreman was going to walk all over Ali. Ali wouldn't let Foreman box the way he wanted to, and subsequently Ali picked up the win. And that's similar to what happened here. And an hour into this match, Hackenschmidt stood up from his usual crouch position. That was the stance that he used to wrestle with, was a crouch stance. He stood up and turned to the referee and said, "He's oiled up. We both need to go to the back, take a hot bath, and just get rid of any oil that's on either of our bodies, and we'll come back out and finish the fight." But the referee said if he had concerns over Gotch being oiled up, he should have mentioned them prior to the match and not now that we're an hour into it. So begrudgingly, Hackenschmidt continued to wrestle and stood up again a few minutes later and said to Gotch, "I declare this match a draw. I'm still the champion. Thank you very much." To which Gotch basically laughed him off and said, "Come on, let's wrestle." 2 hours into the match, having avoided the feared spinning toe hold for 2 hours, Gotch finally managed to apply the hold, and within a couple of minutes of having it locked in, Hackenschmidt submitted and said, "I surrender the World Heavyweight Championship to Mr. Gotch." Both men retired to the back after that was just the first fall, so both men retired to the back after the first fall. Gotch re-emerged a few moments later, but Hackenschmidt never returned to the ring. Eventually he came out and he shook Gotch's hand, declared him the World Heavyweight Champion, and that was the first defeat in the history of Georg Hackenschmidt's career. Some 1,000 or so matches, Hackenschmidt had lost his first match. Although initially accepting defeat graciously and gracefully in the United States, upon returning home to Europe, Hackenschmidt completely changed his tone. Whereas in the States, he was telling everybody how great a wrestler Gotch was and how great the American people were. In Europe, he was telling a completely different story, telling of underhanded tactics used by Gotch during their World Heavyweight Championship match in Chicago. Tactics such as headbutts, slaps to the face, basically anything that Gotch could do to get under Hackenschmidt's skin. Hackenschmidt claimed that Gotch used those particular tactics. And a lot of reports from people in attendance suggested that that was correct, although there were some reports that also came out which said that Hackenschmidt engaged in similar tactics, making his comments very hypocritical and very controversial at the time. Despite initially claiming that Hackenschmidt had no desire to wrestle Gotch again for the World Heavyweight Championship, he finally agreed to the match, which was set for September 4th, 1911 at Chicago's newly built Comiskey Park. The match set all kinds of new records, record attendance of 30,000 people, and a record gate of $87,000. The rematch didn't last anywhere near as long as the first, as Gotch won in 2 straight falls in approximately 30 minutes, once again claiming victory with a step over toe hold. The match once again didn't come without controversy though, as in training, Hackenschmidt was injured by his trainer Dr. Ben Roller. It was claimed by former wrestler Ad Santel during a conversation with Lou Thez that he was paid $5,000 by Gotch's backers to injure Hack, but to make the injury look like an accident. This claim was shot down years later by both Hackenschmidt and his chief training partner Dr. Ben Roller. According to both Hackenschmidt and Roller, the injury to the Russian Lion's right knee was caused by Roller during a training session. Hackenschmidt also confirmed his sparring partners in the training for the rematch with Gotch were Gus Schoenlein, Jacobus Koch, Vladek Zabisco, and Dr. Ben Roller. Santel was never mentioned in any account by either Hackenschmidt or Roller. Gotch retired in 1913 as the World Heavyweight Champion, having defeated Georg Lurich of Estonia on April 1st, 1913. He retired as the World Heavyweight Champion and passed away just 4 years later at the age of 39 from uremic poisoning, leaving behind perhaps one of the greatest careers the professional wrestling industry has ever seen, and some regard him as the greatest wrestler of all time. Hackenschmidt retired shortly after the rematch against Gotch. He was training for a match with Stanislav Zabisco, but unfortunately the knee injury sustained in the build-up to the Gotch rematch was too much for him to contend with, and he retired shortly after the rematch with Gotch. He passed away in 1968 in London, England, survived by his wife at the age of 90. So there you have just a brief roundup of the rivalry and the careers of Georg Hackenschmidt and Frank Gotch, two of the finest wrestlers the world has ever seen, and two of the finest rivals the world has ever seen. The controversy, the matches, everything surrounding the Gotch and Hackenschmidt story is something I've always found very fascinating and something that I've always been interested in. And I love going back to read about things and learn new things that I didn't perhaps know previously from this rivalry. Next episode, I'll be looking at the feud between the Fabulous Freebirds and the Von Erichs from WCCW. That'll be coming in a couple of weeks' time on the YouTube and Facebook channels, so keep a lookout for that, and I'll see you again.